What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Hey, welcome everybody to another Every Other Wednesday. The doors are open. Come on in, grab a good seat, grab a coffee, get some popcorn, maybe some, I don't know.
What's our question? What's our chat question?
Well, we're talking about happiness in the workplace and what robs us of happiness, especially. So why don't we in the chat box, and please make sure you hit the drop down menu if you have to hit everybody. What ahoy? We can still say that. Yes, it was International Talk Like a Pirate Day the other day. What makes you happy? What makes you happiest at work?
Okay, and make sure that you reply to everyone, not just everyone.
And by the way, you can't say not going because that doesn't count.
Yeah.
Humor.
So Carol,
good answer.
You spelled with no U. You misspelled that, Carol. You need to put a U in there. It's all right though. We'll let it slide.
We'll let it. Yeah. How do you pronounce humor? Practical jokes.
We leave those unnecessary vowels out of
it. That was one of the panelists wrote that. That's just you're disqualified. Accomplishment.
I wrote accomplishment. Yeah.
People might copy your answer.
Look now. So Carol has written humor without a U twice, without either U.
Right.
That's better.
Because humor is not about you.
Carol makes me happy.
Humor is not about you. It's about us.
Yeah. So facilitating a great session with active participation. Yeah. Oh, Frederick, I know what you mean by happy but tired. I call that a good tired.
A good tired.
Yeah.
Recognition's so important, right? Everybody wants to be appreciated. We got to show people the love.
And not only, but recognition in the form in which they want to be recognized. Right. And we've talked about this in the past, like just if someone doesn't want public recognition and standing ovations, because some people get embarrassed by that.
Yeah.
Don't give it to them. Give it
to me. Give it to me because I don't get embarrassed.
There you go. As a speaker, I would hope that you're striving for those.
Yes. No, I mean,
to be challenged, I like that.
Something that makes me happy at work is when everything works, when all the technology works, when my computer works, when my printer works, when the lighting in here works, everything.
You know what makes me happy?
When the coffee machine
in the morning.
You know, just the whole you thing, and Carol made a mention of it. Do you know where that actually comes from? I've heard this. I'm not 100% sure on the truthfulness of it, but apparently it was a way to reduce costs when printing.
Yeah, so you wouldn't have to put that little extra letter,
that character in there.
Yeah, when they used to do that.
Always about the money.
That's right. That's right.
Got to drop those U's. Save a little.
Yeah. Speaking of your coffee, I was, I was. We'll talk about this later, but I was supposed to be traveling today, and I'm here. But I was this morning in a hotel in New York City. I'm in my place in Jacksonville now, but I was in New York City this morning at a new Hilton concept hotel called Motto, and I really liked it. Except I woke up this morning and there was no coffee in the room.
What?
So that's that's a deal breaker for me.
I don't understand you coffee drinkers, you weird elixir gulpers.
Yeah, I will never stay in a Motto again. I mean, if you don't like coffee, then the Motto is a great concept, but I just didn't.
So basically, did you ask them what's the motto with you?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Well, I want to know what their motto was. Was their motto was we don't provide coffee?
So Peggy wants you to turn around, Mike, and look at the sign on your door. Humor at work, but there's no U in it. I have often
no, there's not.
I have often noticed that. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? It is 3 minutes after. We have 28 happy souls in the room, and so it is Wednesday, September the 21st, and we know what that means. What?
What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
By the way, I'd like to point out that it is my mom's birthday today, and in 3 days, it'll be Richard's birthday.
I'm not going to say happy early birthday, Richard.
You're not going to divulge the ages of either your mother or your friend.
But it's weird. You're both younger than me.
Happy birthday, Mrs. Nath. Is she called Mrs. Nath? Yeah. What can you tell us her first name?
My mom's first name is Dimitra.
Dimitra, that's right.
Dimitra. Yeah. For those who don't know, my mom is actually Greek. So
yeah. I knew that was her name, but
happy birthday, Sanjay's mom. I just call her
Linda. Say go back to Marriott. I wish I had because Linda is with Marriott.
Yes. Happy Day of Gratitude, yes, and International Day of Peace, I believe, and School Backpack Awareness Day. Anyways, Hey, welcome
What are we
everyone. It
talking
is
about
another
today?
every other Wednesday. My name is Michael Kirk, coming to you as always. Well, not always, but most often from the beautiful, spectacular Canadian Rockies in Canmore, Alberta. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Sanjay.
So technically, you're not introducing me. You're just
No, I'm
mentioning
not.
my name and
I
getting me to
know. As
introduce
soon as I
myself.
said it, I thought,
Not to be technical or anything. My name is Sanjay Knapp. I'm coming from just outside of Toronto, Ontario, and I am a speaker and author that focuses on performance. Mr. Haddon.
And I'm Richard Haddon, and I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm a speaker and author, and I focus on happiness at work, of all things.
I think we all focus on that. Hey, don't we have another theme song to cue up in honor of our topic?
I think we do. So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about happiness at work.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Okay, I kept that under 15 seconds, and that fits in with the fair use law here in the United States. So
thank you, Richard.
We have broken no laws. You hear that a lot from politicians.
Broken no laws. As always, we'd ask you to put your comments, your questions, your ideas in the chat box. I believe Mr. Richard Haddon will be our chat herder for today, and I have the honor of being the cat herder as we dive into this topic. So let's dive in, gentlemen. Yeah. Let's start with just the big picture here. Does it matter? Does happiness at work matter? And is it a manager's, leader's, organization's job to make sure the employees are all happy?
Well, Michelle Wilcox is answering, I believe, your first question, which is, does happiness matter at work? And she says, oh, heck yeah. And April Martin says, yes. But what was the second part of your question, Mike?
Well, is it a leader's job? Is it a manager's job, an organization's job to worry about whether their employees are happy or not?
Well, now, that's not exactly what you said at first. Is it their job to worry about whether or not people are happy, or is it their job to make sure employees are happy? And I would say that, and I speak with a little bit of authority on this subject, I think, and that is, I would say that no, it is not a leader's job to make sure that people are happy. I think it is a leader's and an organization's job to make sure that the business is successful and that they have good outcomes. I also believe, not based on opinion, but based on lots of firsthand research, that happier people will increase tremendously the likelihood of those organizations being successful. So I guess in a roundabout or in an indirect way, if you believe, and I do, and I think most of us do, that happier employees, in fact, there's another word I'm trying to think of. But yeah, happier employees.
We're going to get to that. We'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yes. But definitely it is. No, it's the leader's job. It's the organization's job to make sure the organization's successful. I strongly believe that one good path, one almost surefire path to that, is to make sure that for the most part, people are happy, depending on how you define the word happy.
So to chime in here, the idea of making people happy is never the leader's responsibility or their job, because you can't do it. Only one person can do it. However, I think it's the organization, the leader, the bigwig's job to facilitate an environment in which happiness can occur. So there has to be conduits and structures and activities that will foster that, because ultimately that's going to feed to your bottom line. I mean, again, yes, as for those of you who aren't or who are new here, maybe are familiar or not familiar, that Richard has written a couple of books, one of which is called "Contented Cows Give Better Milk," and that's just the whole idea.
Oh, do you mean this? Yeah.
Whoa, shameless plug. But the whole concept, and there's, like you said, there's a lot of research behind it, that when people don't have to go to work,
I got charts.
Are there pictures to color? Yeah. When people don't have to go to work but get to go to work, they produce better. And so how can we as an organization or as a leader or as a manager create ways for that to happen?
Yeah, or to allow it to happen.
And point taken that we have to be careful when we say, it's totally our job to make someone happy. One of the lines I always use is, people should not be outsourcing their happiness to anyone. Yeah. So if you're a frontline employee, don't outsource your happiness to your boss. That's a recipe for unhappiness, I believe. We have to take responsibility for our own happiness. However, to the point of both of what you're saying, there's a ton of research. Here's just one of many, many examples I have written about. This company, construction materials company, Canpa. They were struggling. They had high employee turnover rates. They intentionally made happiness at work their top priority. After they did that and made it their #1 priority, they saw a 7 times increase in revenue, and they turned a 30% employee turnover rate into a negative turnover rate, which is a term we don't hear very often, when employees who left the company returned back to the company in droves because they totally transformed their culture by making happiness a top priority.
Okay, so we're talking about happiness. What is it? What does it mean to be happy? Let's kind of throw around a definition. What do you guys think of when we talk about an employee happiness? What does that mean?
Well, and what's the difference between, say, well, back to Richard's book, being contented? Should we just be aiming for contentment or happiness?
Well, let me say something about the term contentment. Some of you know, some maybe don't, that we borrowed with permission that term contented cows from carnation milk. Oh, wait a minute. I happen to have a can of carnation milk right here. And on the label somewhere, it says, I don't know if you can see it. It says from contented cows, velvetized, homogenized from contented cows. And so we used that because it was at the time quite a familiar phrase, and it's also alliterative, which is always good. But we also write at the very beginning that, contented, some people contented is kind of like, it's important to distinguish happiness and contentment from complacency. So we also say, it's not about being complacent. It's not about being just kind of, doing whatever you want and all of that. But I think to answer your question, Sanjay, for me, happiness, I think there's a chemical reaction in the brain that is associated with happiness. And so sometimes, you're not able to feel that, even though maybe your situation is happy. Other times, it's not all that happy, but you can still find happiness inside.
There are several happiness researchers, and my goodness, this topic has been studied the last 10 years like never before. In fact, folks might be interested in this. I went through the whole program. I read a ton about this topic. Yale offers a free online course on happiness with a lot of this research compiled into it. It's a great program. But I've heard happiness experts say that, in fact, what we should really aim for is contentment in work, that contentment is a longer term feeling of more than satisfaction, I think, but a longer term way of being, whereas happiness is more ephemeral. It's more those moments, those ephemeral times when we experience joy, when we're excited about something, right?
Exuberance.
The way I look at it is, and I'm saying it very bluntly, but happiness is more of a manic state. It is a one-sided thing, that it's a blip. It's like, I'm going on the roller coaster. But contentment is the whole picture. Contentment says, I'm going to be challenged at work. And because I'm going to be challenged at work, I'm going to get a sense of accomplishment when I do those challenges. Because if everything's easy, then you become complacent. It's the idea of when a kid is on summer break and they're bored and all they're doing is watching TV, they're supposed to be happy, but they're not. So you actually need certain things, like you need to be challenged, you need to be growing, you need to be having discussion, you need to feel a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And so putting all that all together is contentment, as opposed to, just that little blip of euphoria, that little shot in the arm, which is not sustainable. Because, and that's, I think it's an issue that organizations or people on an individual basis sometimes struggle with. We go, we want to be happy. I only want to be happy. I never want to be sad. And the reality is, you can't actually know happiness without knowing sadness. So as a human being, you have to experience all the emotions. Although we're saying we want to have happy workplaces, I totally agree that it goes beyond, it goes much deeper than the superficial happy. It is this contentment piece.
Right. It's a more general. I think it's a more general condition that can weather the ups and downs. So you can be happy in general. If something bad happens at you're still happy. You're still happy at work. We've got some, as always, the audience is so much more kind of with it than we are. They have all kind of wisdom. Frederick has said complacent cows give tepid tap water, and then Rob follows up similarly with complacent cows give stale milk. But here we're talking, someone has said something about the contribution you make to the success of the organization, enjoying your job and the related tasks. Frederick, of course, says, happiness feels spiky based on endorphins. Contentment is more stable, more like a general wellness. I really like that.
One's a short-term fix. The other's a long-term goal.
Yeah, that's good.
And a study in the book Beyond Happiness cited in this book, they found the 3 most important drivers of happiness, and several folks are hitting on this in the chat box, are a sense of control over your life, over your job, right? Making progress at work, and feeling connected to your organization. Back to that sense of belonging and feeling connected. So that's kind of interesting. And there was research too cited in Fast Company that suggests that people are much happier than they actually think they are at work. In other words, when you measure what people say about, especially when they're off work hours and
like Sunday evening before going in,
they might gripe about work and say, "Oh, my boss is, and I'm working with this jerk and it's a pain." But in fact, when they actually measure people and track it while they're on their jobs, they're actually much happier than they.
And that's weird because from firsthand experience, I find that I always dread seeing you guys on every other Wednesdays, and when I get here, it's actually worse.
It's not nearly as bad. I know
it's not as bad. I know.
No,
like,
it's
I'm thinking,
worse.
oh, is Sanjay going to be on the call again? Oh man! And then I can't.
Hey, listen. Oh, we have to say something about Jeff. Speaking of not being on the call, so Jeff
thought he might
be able. Yeah, Jeff's not here. If you didn't notice, Jeff thought he might be with us today. I thought it'd be a little bit of a stretch. Jeff is in Africa. I believe he's in Uganda today. If it's Wednesday, it must be Uganda. He was in Tanzania, but I think he has moved on to Uganda. So anyway, we're sorry that Jeff can't be with us.
Richard was supposed to be in Puerto Rico.
I was supposed to be in Puerto Rico today, but as you know, Fiona, which is the name of my niece in Scotland, and she's not nearly as much of a problem as the hurricane was, but Hurricane Fiona came and really did some damage in Puerto Rico. My client is fine, but it's just best if we reschedule.
Our thoughts go out to everybody in Puerto Rico. They've been slammed again. So another question here then, if we decide, if we believe the premise is true that, we want to make an organization where people can live up to their potential and be as happy as possible and be their best selves, are there ever times when there's a danger of prioritizing happiness at the expense of other things? Is that ever a danger?
What kind of other things do you have in mind, Mike?
Well, I don't know. I'm just opening up that question.
I think that I guess it always comes back down to what's the desired result of the organization? What is the mission? What is the vision? Because anything can be in an extreme done detrimentally, right? Because if you're now sacrificing profits and people's health but everyone's happy because we're going to smoke up all day and we're happy. And you're giving up everything else. You're putting up poor products. You're not doing well for the environment. You're not doing corporate social responsibility. Anything in the extreme can be bad. But I think as long as you're clear on what the end in mind is, what is the vision, the mission, the goal of the organization, I think that it almost always will support that. Again, except for in very extreme cases. So what you want to do is like a Venn diagram. You go, here's the goal, and here's the happiness quotient. Where it overlaps, that's going to be the sweet spot, because we're going to get people, the Olympic rings. That's where we're going to get people excited to go to work. We're going to be getting superior products. We're going to get people the energy and the synergy that goes on there. Like, there are going to be health benefits to that. There's going to be all kinds of goodness. People are going to be pounding on the door, coming to wanting to work for this type of an organization.
Yeah, lower employee turnover rates, lower absenteeism rates, lower presenteeism rates. One would
higher
think.
Job satisfaction.
Our friend Steve was asking about if there's any stats related to health and wellness measures and medical related.
There clearly are. I don't have any to hand at the moment, but definitely I have seen very credible research on the link between happiness, contentment, whatever you want to call it, and yeah, workers' comp claims, which is do you Canadians know what workers' comp is? And the other.
We spell it differently,
claims
pronounce
and
it differently,
claims and all of that. Yeah. And I think just health and safety in general with that. I think a lot of it has to do with the how congruent the goals and objectives are between a person and the organization and between people in the organization. So if you say that our objective is to do such and such, let's say that we have a goal to come out with a new product or you know, a project, and everybody's focused on that goal, and that project is realized, that creates a great sense of accomplishment and therefore happiness with people. But if you have people over here who are wanting this, and you have another group of people in the same organization and they have a different objective or a different goal, you have some very unhappy people, even though both might be accomplishing what they're doing.
And so here's the thing is an effective leader will understand when there's an incongruency, and they'll be able to translate into the language that's important. So as an example, if I don't know, let's go to stereotypical things. The employees are all about the environment and the organization is all about the money. So an effective leader would be able to say, hey, look as we make money, we can do better for the environment, or we can then give some here to this, or we're going to change our practices so that they're more sustainable, so that we can still accomplish more and still give them what they want. So I think that happiness piece is so tied into the congruency of the organization you're working for and what's important to you. Yeah. And for example, if they're a family values organization and you're a family values person, you're like, I love these people. They look after me. They let me skip work to go watch my kids' baseball game. On the flip side, if you're a family person and they're like, job first, you know, you're a robot. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that set of values, but it might not be a good fit for that particular employee. And so what happens is in that environment, they find themselves being less happy because of lack of fit. So I think, and this goes back, we've talked to this ad nauseum, in the interviewing process, this is all about being transparent and being open to find out and assess if a fit, and a fit for an employee and the organization together, rather than trying to pull it over and saying, hey, well, we're not going to tell them this. And once we hook them in, then we'll break the news to them.
Yeah. So it's about the employee having the potential to be happy, productive, and successful in that environment and in that job. I want to talk about the role of the actual work itself, and does the work itself make you happy? You know, people have different things that they like to do. I mean, Sanjay, we know that you're a numbers nerd, and so if you worked if you ever had a real job that allowed you to be successful with numbers, that would make you happy, right?
Wait a minute, a real job?
Yeah, none of us want to even broach that, but yeah.
A job?
A job, yeah. No, but I mean, it goes, you know, some people are detail oriented, and so when they have the opportunity to do that, they really love it. Some people are love to talk and to have conversations with people. People are very social, and if you're in a social thing, I think if you're a social person and you happen to be in a job that has very limited contact with other human beings, you're probably not going to be very happy, and vice versa.
So I was doing work with an organization. I think I've told the story, but maybe 6 months, a year ago on EOW. But I was doing some work with an organization. It was like a resort golf club kind of organization. And the executive director, I was chatting with him, and he was saying what he does is he personally hires everyone. So he actually does the interviewing process and such. And he goes, and after, I can't remember what the time frame was. It was like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. He always checks in with them. And he actually had this like structure of doing it. He would say, what do you like most about your job? What do you like least about your job? And what he was trying to do was kind of reassess the fit. And he told me about this one story. And he said there's this one kid that he had hired as a server. And the kid was, you know, spunky and had all kinds of energy and stuff. And he's like, so, you know, what do you love most about your job? And he was like, oh man, taking the orders, it's just great. Like they want extra lettuce and no mustard. And getting that order right is just so cool. And he said, okay, that's fair enough. He goes, what do you like least about your job? And he goes, probably the customers and interacting with them. And so we had a big example. Yeah. And so he said he realized that this kid was like a controller in the making. He wanted to get it right and precise and was accurate and attention to detail and stuff. And so we actually made up a term on the spot. And so he said he reassigned him and he put him into a different area. And I said, was that a promotion? And he actually asked me, he said, was that a promotion or a demotion? And I thought about it. And I said, I think it was a fit motion. And so we created this new term. It's a fit motion. And that has to do, I mean, having the right fit, it's so much tied into your happiness. It's not good or bad to be a controller or good or bad to be a server or a people person or want to work on your own. It's, can you foster the environment, which again goes back to the original question Mike asked.
Brilliant, yeah.
As a leader, can we foster the environment so that people have the opportunity to be happy given the aptitudes and the strengths they bring to the particular organization?
And that speaks to the wonderful work that Yale professor Amy Wrzesniewski does on the role of meaning and purpose in people's jobs, and how people can craft she uses the term job crafting, to shift your job just sometimes in simple ways so that it is a better fit, so that it is a better match for you. And a lot of that is just mindset, right? We've probably talked about this before, right? You're flying on a plane, as we all do, and you watch the behaviors of the flight attendants and you think, okay, same airline, same culture, same level of pay, same duties.
One of these is happy and one is not.
One of them not so happy.
I saw this morning.
Right. So, again, it's that taking personal responsibility.
The old Sesame Street thing, one of these employees doesn't belong here.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk. Time is going faster. Several months ago in my newsletter, I wrote about some happiness thieves that might be robbing us of happiness at work. So let's touch on at least some of those.
Talk about thieves.
The first one being, if this can rob you of your happiness if you are constantly seeking external validation. Thoughts on that? I
said that first. I was the one that said external validation. That was my idea. Just tell them in the chat box. Tell them it was my idea.
It was Sanjay.
I wrote about this months ago. Silly boy.
It was Sanjay. No, you're absolutely right, Mike. I think, like you said before, don't outsource your happiness to not only to your boss but also to your coworkers. And if you need that kind of external gratification, you're not going to be as happy as if you're able to generate that gratification yourself.
It's always internally
it's not
driven.
To manufacture it out of nothing, but if you can, if you do a great job, if your customers are happy, and if you're happy with the accomplishments that you've made, then recognizing that can create a sense of happiness that you are in control of without relying on others who may, not because they don't want to be appreciative of you, but they just, we got other things to do and think about, and they may not be able to provide the kind of validation that you need.
Yeah, in an ideal world, right? In an ideal world, we'd all be getting the love that we deserve and the appreciation and the recognition, but we have to take responsibility for that. I don't know if I've told this story either, but this customs official I met years ago, 20 years ago, named Randy, who told me about how every year for like 8 years in a row, he's won the Customs Official of the Year award program. And I said, oh, that's awesome.
In Canada?
What are you doing to rock your...
In Canada?
In Canada, yes. What are you doing?
It's amazing that they have a Customs Official of the Year in Canada.
Well, let me finish the story, if I may.
What makes Mike happy is when people let him finish his story. Go ahead. So I says to him, what are you doing to rock it? Like, that's pretty impressive. And he said, well, it's easy. I'm the coordinating committee for the award. I'm the judge of the award. I organize the party. I organize the dinner. So he was taking personal responsibility for recognizing himself. And it turned into this big joke where everyone played along. But I think that's a great example of just taking responsibility for your own recognition and happiness. Okay.
I also think, though, too, it's all internally driven, right? If we're constantly, it's the idea, my dad used to say this, he goes, if you take a diamond and you put it in a pile of poop, it still shines. Right. So if you're internally happy, even if you're put into circumstances that aren't necessarily ideal, you'll look for opportunities in which to shine. It's the old cliche about the twin boys, and when the father wants to teach them a lesson, he gives one a pile of poop and one gives them every toy. Right. You guys know the story. For people that don't, I'll finish the last 10 seconds of it. The kid who gets all the toys, he's the eternal pessimist, so that the father's trying to teach him a lesson. And the eternal optimist, he gives him a pile of poop, and he goes to see the pessimist, and he crosses his arms and he says, this is stupid. This toy doesn't look like it did on TV, and this one broke too easily, and this one's poorly made, and it all sucks. And so he goes over and he checks on the optimist, and he walks into the room, and the kid's flinging poo all over the place. And the father says, what are you doing? He said, well, with all this poop, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. So There you go.
Thank you for that image.
Okay. Happiness thief number 2, which kind of relates to that. And Sanjay wanted to get to this one, I know. Having unrealistic expectations. This notion that we should be happy every minute of the day at work, 24/7. We go on Facebook and we see these picture perfect examples of everyone living their best life. And is
it's
that
crap.
realistic?
It's crap. Like, you are a human being, and as a human being, you have good days and you have bad days, and you have happy moments and you have sad moments. But putting them all together and having a true appreciation, this is, again, we're trying to play with that definition of what it means to be happy. I think it goes beyond that, and we use them interchangeably. We say happy is kind of the same as content, but to me, like, real happiness is this contentment. It brings in these other elements that we sometimes gloss over. Like, again, you are allowed to have bad days. You're allowed to stub your toe and curse and swear and have bedhead and be cranky. But are you learning from those, and are you leveraging them to, when you have the good times, appreciate them? It reminds me of in the speaking industry, when business is slow, there are so many speakers who complain and go, oh, business is slow, this sucks, poor me, I'm not making any money. And then when business is super busy, they go, oh, business is so busy, I don't have time to eat or sleep or see my kids, it sucks. Right. So on the flip side, there are people that go, business is great, I'm making money. And when business is slow, I can catch my breath and see my family again.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. Maria has offered a resource here. Thank you, Maria. On happiness in general, Laurie Santos leads the Yale Happiness course, and she has an awesome podcast, The Happiness Lab. Thank you for that, Maria. That would be a great podcast to check out, The Happiness Lab.
It is right. It is right. It is right there, right
on
there.
your
See
phone.
that? I listened to it. It's a great podcast.
Great.
Thank you for that.
Right.
And yeah, you wouldn't appreciate a good day without a bad day. Thank you for that, Dan. I think the key, what I always say too, is it's okay. We all have days like this, right? It's okay to have even a week like this. What we want to make sure is it doesn't become the long term, that we're not living in this place.
It's like, think of the suckers in San Diego with their weather. They don't appreciate it that it's so nice. It's the same every day. Like,
I know.
We get 4 seasons.
They should move to Canada.
Exactly.
How
What's
about
another one, Mike?
Third happiness thief, comparing yourself to others, the disease of comparisonitis. There's always a bigger boat, a nicer car, a bigger house.
More appreciation,
going on
better recognition from your boss.
A bigger office at work.
You know what? No matter where you are on the totem pole of life, things can always get better, things can always get worse.
Right.
And I mean, perspective dictates so much of that. And if you, I'm a huge believer of those in the universe. Those who are grateful get more to be grateful for, and those who bitch and complain get more to bitch and complain about. So
on the notion of comparisonitis, what I advise people to try to do, and I try to do this myself, is the only thing I try to compare myself to is my former self. And right.
Well, that's what growth is, though, right? You compare yourself, you try to get a little bit better.
Okay, number 4, happiness thief, over-identifying with your career. Yes, we want people to be enthusiastic about their jobs and ideally love their jobs, but is there a danger in over-identifying with your career, your job?
So Covey does this whole thing about being value-centered rather than being stuff-centered or people-centered or career-centered. Because the argument in the book is, he says, if you are stuff-centered and say you're car-centric, and your car gets banged up, someone steals your car, where are you? And I think this is why so many people, you should have an identity in your job, absolutely, but your job is not you. And so that's why often when people lose their job, especially if they've been a career at this one particular job or one particular organization, they are lost because they put so much into that identity, and they go, now that I don't have that, I don't have anything else. No, part of you expresses who you are through that job, and it's just a conduit for who you are. None of that's taken away if you take those same attributes and go and put them in a different form, in a different organization, a different role, a different volunteer
And there's some evidence that as through the march of time, that people are less likely to be quite as connected to their career in terms of their sense of identity as they once were. Doesn't mean that people aren't still that way, but in general, newer entrants to the workforce tend to be less connected to that than, I mean, yeah, my dad, I don't know about your parents, you know, my dad and people of that generation, even people of our generation, you know, just very, very connected and identified with that job. And then when you lose that, you lose everything. But if you, there's evidence that people are not that much anymore. You know, I've seen a pie chart with, okay, this is my job, but then this is my family and my life and my hobbies and my fun and my all of that kind of stuff. And
That's
that
really
way,
good.
if you lose that, then you still have everything else to fall back on.
But that's a lot of the Gen Ys, they say that about the millennials, that the reason they're so value centric is because they figure if they don't like the job, they just go, take this job and shove it. And then they just move into their parents' basement. So they got a backup.
Well, and it speaks to the challenge a lot of people face with retirement too, right? When people are really wrapped up in their careers and they retire, and then it's like,
Yeah,
this is,
you know,
this
it's
is
funny because I was just in Florida last week before, speaking to funeral directors, and the session after me was something on
good business in Florida. Yeah,
exactly. The session after me was talking about succession planning, and the guy just made this brilliant point, and everyone in the room just lost it, about people holding on too long for retirement. And he was saying, you know, a lot of times people hold on so long and then they give the business to their kids, but their kids have already retired. And so we have to have that balance of when's enough, when do we step away, when is it, do we separate who we are from what we're doing?
right. And I think even there's the danger of, if you are still working, if you over-identify with your job, I suspect there are times when decisions get made in your organization, setback happens, and you take it more personally than other people might if you really just embodied that career as your identity. Number 5, and you touched on this, Sanjay, focusing on material things over experiences. There's a book on one of my bookshelves, I think this one right behind me, called, I think, Happy Money by Elizabeth Dunn, if I'm not, and it's a fascinating book because it's all about how our spending habits correlate to happiness. And there's been a ton of research in this field too, right? How we should, the Reader's Digest version, for the most part, be spending our money as much as possible on experiences. People are much happier when we go out for dinner with a group of friends, when we travel with our money, when we go to a concert, as opposed to buying stuff, as opposed to filling our garage with stuff.
Absolutely. We've really adopted that in our family because, I mean, you know, like so many people, you know, we don't have everything, but if we don't have it, it's because we can't afford it. And probably,
well, and Richard, you wouldn't have room for everything, would you?
That's right. We don't have room for what we've got. And so just in the last few years, experiences. So as Sanjay was so kind to point out, I do have a birthday coming up in 3 days. And I just haven't seen things being wrapped around here. And I suspect that's because there are experience gifts rather than thing gifts. I have so many socks. I have so many ties. I wear now a tie about 4 times a year. I have so many things. But those experiences, that's the kind of stuff that I value. And I think a lot of people are that way.
Okay, just throwing this out here though, Richard. You haven't seen things being wrapped, but I do want to remind you, it's pretty hard to wrap a car.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. But think,
you know what, though,
more thoughtful about how we spend our money.
I want to point out though that I guess it also depends on the value of the person, because some people want stuff, or stuff represents the experience. Like you go to a concert and what do? You buy the shirt. You
buy stuff to remind you of it. Yeah.
To remind you of the experience. So I think they are related. I think to go to one extreme or the other, to go, no, only experiences, no stuff. You know, they do go hand in hand. I mean, even if you go out to dinner, you're buying stuff, you're buying the food, but it's the experience that you know, that we take from. So I think there is a compromise there, but let's not obsess about the thing more than the journey to get the thing.
I think too that people overestimate how much buying a thing will make them happy. That's certainly what the research shows. They think, you know, getting that new cars is going to make them incredibly happy, but we know it's very quickly over time.
Sure, right? But what about at work when we talk about, you know, if we want to do something to make someone happy, to show some appreciation and so forth? I think the same thing. experiences, or do we, there's so much of this, you have this catalog and you go online and you pick out something with the company logo on it that, to thank you for your 45 years of service here. I think people would far rather have an experience like, give me an extra week off at a trip to someplace.
Exactly. Well, and there's studies that show this, Richard. Exactly. Yeah. People say they would rather have, $1,000. Yeah, I'll take the $1,000 cash, please. That's what they think they want. But then when they go back and retroactively measure people's happiness and how excited they were by different recognition forms, it was the experiences that actually ended up making people feel way happier.
You're right. Also, and Yvette has just said the same thing. Honestly, most employees appreciate a thank you from the boss than a gift card for $10. We don't have a lot of time, but very quickly, during the worst of the pandemic, when we were doing a lot of stuff virtually, I had the opportunity to poll about 2,500 people over the course of more than a year. And I simply asked the question, how do you want to be thanked? I gave them 8 choices, and the number 1 choice was a verbal thank you from my coworker. And the number 4 choice was time off with pay. And the number 5 choice was a gift, monetary gift. So yeah, just to Yvette's point.
Yeah. So tomorrow is my manager's birthday, and there's a handwritten note for me to him with a gift card that I will give to him. But just that idea of that's people.
A lot of birthdays this week.
Yeah, people want to be.
Is Richard's in the mail, Sanjay?
Yeah. No, I was flying it over.
Okay, you have to pay customs on that.
Florida. It's hurricane season, right?
Hey, so last happiness thief, and this one is kind of a little bit I don't know if ironic is the right term, but it's this: pursuing happiness. Pursuing happiness can actually make you unhappy.
Yes, even though that's written in the founding documents of this country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's right.
Well, I think it's anything that when you get so obsessed with a goal and you get tunnel vision to it, you end up actually stepping back. So the idea of being, having a big picture of this is where I want to go, but not obsessing with the actual journey.
And then you miss those moments.
Yeah.
You're looking so far ahead that you miss. It's like you're looking so far out the front of the windshield that you miss all the scenery.
So if I can ramble on, I used to use this story when I was speaking to youth. It's a Greek myth that I got when I was like in 7th grade. The myth of the stonemason. And the stonemason's picking away at his rocks one day, thinking to himself, "My life sucks." He goes, "I work so hard, I make no money, I wear these crappy robes, and I sell what I make over there to the merchant, and he takes what I make and he sells them for more money." And he goes, "I'd be happy if I was the merchant." And the next thing you know, he becomes the merchant. And he's feeling good, and he's laughing at the stonemason, except the prince walks by. When the prince walks by, he has to pay taxes to the prince. And he goes, "Man, the prince must be the most powerful man in the universe. I'd totally be happy if I was the prince." And the next thing you know, he's the prince. He's the prince. People are carrying him through the village. He's loving it. Everyone's throwing money at him and taxes and bowing at him, except the sun's beating on him and he's sweating like a pig. And he's like, "Oh man, the prince is the most powerful man, but the sun is the most powerful force. I would definitely be happy if I was the sun." And the next thing you know, he's the sun. Feeling good until all of a sudden that cloud comes and blocks him. And he goes, "Man, the cloud can block the sun. I'd be happy if I was the cloud." He becomes the cloud.
Gun burns him up. How do you remember all of this, Sanjay?
A gust of wind comes and blows the cloud away. He's like, "I wish I was the wind." Finally, he's the wind. He's blowing through the feathers of leaves. He runs headlong into a boulder and he goes, "This rock, it's the most unstoppable, impermeable thing in the universe. I'd be totally happy if I was the rock." And the next thing you know, he's the rock. And the first thing he does is, "I rock." No, he didn't. He looks up and he sees the stonemason coming toward the pickaxe and shovel, and he starts going, "I wish I was the stonemason. I wish I was the stonemason." Often when we have this pursuit of happiness and we start looking for everything and everyone else around us, we can find that the very things we're looking for externally are already internally within us. Whether it's health, whether it's family, whether it's a good paying job, or it's an opportunity to help people. So rather than looking externally for the validation, when we go internal, we find so much more contentment there.
Well, yes, wonderful, wonderful parable, Sanjay. Totally true. And it ties into this point too, that I think we have to be aware of, and we all suffer from this sometimes, right? Is I'll be happy when I do this. I'll be happy once I get that promotion. I'll be happy once I have a better job, once we have a new house, once this crazy period is over. I'll be right. We
So-
need
so
a
in our
short
last-
time, and so you're always chasing this elusive.
So
How do we
so
shift
let's
from I'll be
summarize
happy
our
when?
last minute?
How do we shift from I'll be happy when to I'm happy because?
Yeah. Well, and that's a great way to end this episode, which we have
is.
to do in the next 60 seconds. I think to summarize what we've said is, yes, happiness does matter. It changes behavior, it changes perception, and from an organizational sense, it has a strong impact on organizational success. Leaders can influence that happiness, but they cannot control it. And ultimately, that happiness has to come from where? Right inside. Yeah.
Is it me, Richard?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
from
me?
Michael. It has to come from Michael.
comes-
So
it-
email
yeah.
him.
I'm responsible for everyone's
Show up at
happiness.
his door.
All right,
We
folks.
never
Well,
mentioned
it's-
chocolate and happiness either. That's
Oh, there's a
just-
big. Oh, yeah. Big.
And thank you,
Oh,
Eleanor. I'm glad the points resonated with you. Thank you, everyone. Hey, and thanks for your great comments as well, as always. Where are we going to be 2 weeks from now, gentlemen?
We're going to be in October the 5th.
And what's
Who's
going to be
gonna be with
happening
us?
on October 5th?
Every other
Who's gonna be
Wednesday.
with us?
Nah.
Okay. Well, so we may have a guest. We don't know that yet, but we'll be happy if we do. We'll be happy even if we don't. We'll be happy no matter
We'll be
what.
happy
We're
no
always
matter
happy
what.
when our
Because
folks from every
happiness
other
is
Wednesday.
internal.
That's right. But we're also even happier when our folks from every other Wednesday join us every other Wednesday. So thanks again for being here, everyone. And we will see you when? Every
other Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye, folks.
Don't worry, everyone. Be happy.
Because I'm happy alone. You know what happiness is to you. 'Cause
Only 15 seconds. Only 15 seconds. Stop.
you feel like that's what you want.